Right, thank you very much indeed. Good afternoon, welcome and hello to this decision-making meeting for the Housing and Tackling Homelessness portfolio. I'm Darren Sanders, I'm the Liberal Democrat member for Baffins, North Milton and South Copner, and also the Cabinet member for Housing and Tackling Homelessness. Before we begin this afternoon's fun and frolics, I have to provide some safety information and housekeeping as follows. If the continuous fire alarm sounds, please evacuate the room and public gallery by the stairwells. Don't use the lifts. Please assemble the turning circle at the end of King Henry Street past the University's Park building, or that way. In order to comply with the fire marshal regulations of the Guildhall Trust, whose building we're using this afternoon, anyone who signed in at the Guildhall reception desk should sign out when leaving the building at the end of today's meeting. I also need to draw people's attention to the fact this meeting is being live streamed and is also available on demand for the next infinite number of years. Everyone speaking by a microphone will be on camera, including those making deputations. I don't think we've got any deputations this afternoon, have we? Nope, don't need to worry about those. Excellent. Members of the press and public, we don't have any press, but they may be watching online, are also permitted to record the meeting on the understanding that it neither disrupts the meeting nor records those stating explicitly that they do not wish to be recorded. Please, can everyone use the microphones? And please note that you don't need to keep your finger on the button whilst speaking. This is a common habit. Yesterday in the council meeting we had here, the microphones often didn't work, so hopefully this afternoon will be a tad better. Please remember to switch off the microphones when you've finished, otherwise you'll be heard. So I'm going to do some introductions. I will start on my left and then go towards the front. So I'll start on my left with Alison.
Alison Harper, Local Democracy Officer. And just to note, we have got apologies from Councillor North.
Okay, thank you. Back row, please.
Alan Denford, Finance Manager.
Shane Galvin, Head of Housing Needs, Advice and Support.
Jo Bennett, Assistant Director, Housing Need and Supply.
Sam Rickard, Housing Regulation Manager.
Claire Hardwick, Head of Private Sector Housing.
Sally Scattergood, Assistant Director Housing.
Mark Fitch, Head of Local Authority Housing.
Amy Holmes, Head of Compliance.
Adam Hardwick, Assistant Director Buildings.
James Hill, Director of Housing, Neighbourhood and Building Services.
Valerie Grattan, Residents Consortium.
Mandy Buxley, Resident Consortium.
Greg Anderson, Residents Consortium.
And then last, but by no means least. That's it, put your microphone on,
apologise,
Raja.
Raja Ghosh, member for Charles Dickens Ward.
Spencer Gardner, member for Drayton and Farlington.
Lovely. Okay, right, that's excellent. So we have only one apology, which is from Councillor Derek North, who is the Reform UK housing spokesman. I have nothing interesting to declare. Spencer or Raj, have you got anything to declare? That's interesting, or just dead dull, really? Okay, that's lovely. So we'll move to item 3, which is changes to the antisocial behaviour and hate crime policies. Who is brave enough? Sally, you're brave enough to do this, so thank you very much indeed.
Yes, thank you. So the purpose of this report is to update the Cabinet member on the proposed changes to Portsmouth Homes antisocial behaviour policy and the introduction of a separate policy specifically for hate crime and hate incidents. Section 3 sets out the social housing regulator consumer standards for Portsmouth Homes responsibilities with regards to ASB and hate crime. Whilst we reviewed and updated our ASB policy back in March 24, there has subsequently been guidance from the Housing Ombudsman that highlighted that residents subjected to hate crime involving different protected characteristics may need a different approach to other types of antisocial behaviour. It is considered good practice to have separate policies for ASB and hate crime and hate incidents. We have reviewed hate crime cases and the ASB policy and agreed that we should create a separate policy specifically for hate crime. This will help emphasise the different impact hate crime can have on those experiencing it. We have consulted residents in the 2 new, now separate policies, and residents were supportive of the approach. The proposed changes to the ASB policy and introduction of a separate hate crime and hate incident policy are recommended to ensure compliance with the social housing regulators' consumer standards, reflect best practice guidance from the Housing Ombudsman, and respond to resident feedback. Separating the policies allows for a more tailored and sensitive approach to hate crime, acknowledges its distinct impact, and supports more effective case management and partnership working. Recommendations of the report are that the Cabinet member approves the changes to the Portsmouth Homes antisocial behaviour policy to be implemented from December 2025, and that the Cabinet member approves the Portsmouth Homes hate crime and hate incident policy to be implemented from December 2025.
Okay, thanks for that, Sally. For those who don't know how these meetings work, I'll ask the residents, our three residents consortium colleagues, for their questions and comments. If they don't have any, that's lovely, and then go to my political opposition for their questions and comments. And feel free to ask what you like. We don't mind. And then I'll sum up at the end. Who was going to go first in rehearsals? Young Mandy. Right, lovely.
Well, I like him, calls me young. Right, yeah, I was really pleased when this came up last month, that it is all going to be separated. And I don't know if you remember, but I was actually looking forward to this month and seeing how it's all going to work. I know that quite often with hate crimes, it's lack of evidence. It's he said, she said, and quite often there's a bit of a stalemate because you can't prove that you've been victim of a hate crime. This I know myself. What measures are going to be put in place to make that a lot easier for the victims, please?
Okay, so we are providing more training for our officers around, the effective way to manage cases, particularly around hate crime. So they've had specific hate crime training. But what I would say is that actually, unlike the police, we don't require 100% proof that an incident has happened. What we need is information that suggests that in all likelihood an incident did happen. So, we've got repeat incidents, we've got a number of different people reporting something similar, that kind of thing. So we don't have to actually have somebody willing to say, independent, yes, on this day I saw this happen. It's about accruing a number of different points of evidence and pulling that together, and we can then use that to actually take action. And we won't always take formal legal action, because what we'll try and do is work with whoever it is that's causing the incidents to try and get them to change their behaviour. But where needed, we can go to formal action, through courts. And as I say, we don't have to have that burden of proof that the police do in terms of 100% proof.
That's great, thank you. And I was really pleased to hear that you're actually training the housing officers to be more aware of these things. And yeah, hopefully it'll help a lot of people. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Mandy. Do any other members of the Residents' Consortium have any questions or comments? Greg.
I just want to say, like Mandy, I've been looking forward to this happening. My son has several times been a victim of hate crime because he's mixed race, and just random people just calling filthy immigrant, go back to your own country, with total freedom to do it. And I just think it's good that we can finally look at it, because he's actually on the autistic spectrum, so it's been really, really difficult for him. And I think we've really got to get to grips with it now. So I'm very pleased also. Thank you.
Thanks, Greg. Is that it from our Residents' Consortium colleagues? It's okay. Spencer, any questions or comments?
Nothing from me, thank you.
Okay, thanks, Spencer. Raj?
No, it seems sensible. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. I have to say, officer colleagues, we had Raj, Spencer and I had about 2 hours, it felt like, of the council meeting yesterday discussing antisocial behaviour and knife crime. And I said then that this policy was the polar opposite of what we were trying to achieve, which is a much more integrated approach across the authority. So I think it's a shame the Housing Ombudsman has decided to separate them out. But nonetheless, I welcome these policies, although the housing services, people's trust in the housing services handling of ASB complaints is about 15 to 20 points higher than other housing associations. Nonetheless, we have to do better, and that's absolutely essential. People have the right to be safe in their own homes. People have the right to feel safe in their own homes, and they have to feel safe in their own homes. That is incredibly important to us as a council, and we have to be as tough as we can in ensuring that happens at all times. So I welcome the antisocial behaviour policy. I also particularly welcome the hate crime policy. Some of the stuff yesterday in the council meeting, we were in particularly from Councillor Nicholas Dorrington and Councillor Ashgar Shah, outlining some of the horror of what they shouldn't have to put up with, was very powerful. We are a welcoming city. We always have been. We welcome people from across the UK and across the world. And to hear some of the stuff, Greg, which was reflected in some of the comments yesterday, is a disgrace, and they should be punished, and punished severely. And I'm delighted we finally got a policy on hate crime that will match up to that. And I hope the rest of the council will follow suit imminently. As I said, people need to feel safe in their own homes, and I'm delighted that we're able to toughen it up so that we can ensure that they can. And I particularly like the training, I have to say. Every single person across this council, in every single position, needs to be able to understand and deal with and recognise the impact of all forms of antisocial behaviour and all forms of hate crime. So well done, Sally and the team, for this report. And I'm delighted, Alison, to approve it, and then we can hopefully start ensuring people can continue to feel safe in their own homes. So thank you very much. The next item, item 4, is similar, which is changes to the Portsmouth Homes domestic abuse policy. Sally, are you leading on that again? Thank you so much.
So the purpose of this report is to update Cabinet Member on the changes proposed to the Portsmouth Homes domestic abuse policy. The policy has been reviewed to reflect learning from case reviews and was consulted on with residents through the Residents' Consortium policy focus groups and via the Portsmouth Homes online consultation page. Section 3 highlights that we previously reviewed the policy in March 2024, and it also provides information about the learning from domestic abuse cases and highlights the recent recruitment of a domestic abuse advisor to help develop the knowledge and skills of the housing officer team, as well as providing additional support for case management. 3.8 shows the following feedback from residents during the consultation process. The domestic abuse policy has been updated to reflect a trauma-informed, person-centred approach. It's worth noting that residents welcomed the shift in language, including the replacement of victim with victim survivor, and to honour individual experiences and recovery journeys, and the replacement of perpetrator with person using abusive behaviours to focus on actions and promote accountability. Residents also positively highlighted the need for greater visibility of support for older individuals affected by domestic abuse. In response to this, the policy now explicitly reinforces the importance of safety within homes and communities for all residents, with a clear commitment to inclusivity across protected characteristics, including senior citizens. The recommendations of the report are that the Cabinet Member approves the revised Portsmouth Homes domestic abuse policy with effect from the 10th of December 2025, and that the Cabinet Member asks Portsmouth Homes to publish the changed policy on the website at the earliest opportunity.
Okay, thank you for that, Sally. Again, colleagues from the Residents' Consortium, any comments or questions? You can say no, it's all right.
No, just to say that we are also very pleased to see this going forward, because it's something that's very close to us personally, and we obviously deal with the consortium and the members, and it comes up all the time. It's a big thing that we're dealing with, and it's just wonderful to see it's moving forward.
Right, yeah, I know I rose a question about male refugees last time, and I was told rightly, excuse me, I was told rightly that there are things in place for men in that situation, which is fantastic. Looking at the papers that I've got here, I was quite pleased that they've actually listed all forms of domestic abuse, because it used to be the old fallacy, as I don't think we all know, unless you're going to get a punch in the face, it's not abuse. And I'm really happy. It is an area that I've worked in, and I've shared a little bit with a few people in here before. And I'm pleased that it's my understanding there are now 3 women's refugees, and including some slightly north of the city as well, which obviously it wouldn't be right for me to say where, but it's not far from the north of the city. So I think that's definite improvements on the service that you provide, and yeah, thank you. Phil? Okay.
Was that it? Okay, all right, well, thank you very much for that. Thank you very much. It's okay, it's allowed. It's all right. Raj, did you have any questions or comments, Scar?
Yeah, just on this and also actually on the previous one, Sally, would we be, obviously we're talking about actual criminal offences both now and with the gentleman's example about his son, which is just horrendous. So we're talking about actual, full-on criminal activity. Would we be proactive in informing the police, or would we only be reactive if the police were to then pick up on this?
So if you're talking about domestic abuse, we're very much led by the person experiencing the domestic abuse. We don't insist on them reporting it to the police as a kind of criteria for us to be able to help them, because our priority is making them safe and working with them to keep them and their families safe. So it isn't something that we insist on, but we do work with the police across all of our ASB cases where required and where appropriate, and across domestic abuse cases where, so particularly if there's a really high risk to someone experiencing domestic abuse and they may not be wanting to engage, then that may get discussed at a multi-agency meeting. But otherwise, we tend to be led by the person complaining.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you very much.
Thanks for that, Raj. Spencer, any questions or comments?
Not for me, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. So I have a question for the team. The budget had basically merged money for homelessness, money for rough sleeping, and money for survivors of domestic abuse into one grant. I recognise we haven't given us an idea of what the grant is yet or how much it will be. But will those changes affect this policy at all, or is it because it's under the housing revenue account that it will be ring-fenced and separate? I hope the answer's the latter. You can pass it who you like, I don't mind.
Thanks, Councillor Sanders. The budget change that you're talking about is a Housing General Fund budget change and relates to the work that happens with our service and domestic abuse services. This is specifically Portsmouth Homes based, and so the separate funding means that there would be no impact on that.
Well, that's a pleasing answer. In the past, when budgets have been merged, they've tended to be cut as well, which is why I was asking, so I'm delighted about that. I said just now that this is about which we have to make sure people are safe in their homes, and this is just the ultimate example of it. I do mildly disagree with the change in language from perpetrator to person who uses abusive behaviour. I could have other words for them, but I probably would be sacked, frankly. Surviving domestic abuse is something that is incredibly important. It is the third biggest cause of homelessness in the city. And we have to make sure, as has been said, that the person concerned, the person at the heart of the abuse, whether it is male, female, or trans, is at the heart of everything that we do. And that's why this approach, particularly from the changes that have come from the comments, is particularly welcome. Having a new domestic abuse advisor means that this council is serious about making sure that we can deal with this horror, and also making sure that we have targeted training sessions. Your point earlier on, Residents Consortium about training, again applying here. We have to make sure everybody understands the signs. We're putting more people on council estates from January to deal with people, particularly with complex cases, and we need to make sure that everybody understands the signs so that they can report it back and things can get going, because that's absolutely crucial. Mandy, you're completely right. For too long, this was swept under the carpet by, I have to say, men who thought it's just domestic, when it isn't. It's the ruin of people's lives. And I'm delighted that we're putting lived experience at the heart of all this. I'm delighted that we've included some feedback from residents in the consultation. That's very helpful. And I'm delighted that we're updating this policy to make sure that people feel safe, particularly in times when they walking home and being in a home is the least safe place of all. So with that, Alison, I'm delighted to approve this policy in full, and I'm assuming it starts from 4:21 p.m. this afternoon. So thank you for that. Next, a slightly different topic, the Empty Private Residential Property Strategy 2025 to 2030. Who wishes to do this?
That will be
Claire?
me. Thank you, Councillor Saunders.
Thank you.
So on the 23rd of April 25, the Cabinet Member for Housing and Tackling Homelessness considered a report titled Empty Private Residential Property Strategy 25 to 30, which presented proposals for a new empty private residential property strategy. The approved recommendations authorised the undertaking of a non-statutory citywide consultation on the proposed draft empty homes strategy. The full report of the consultation is contained in Appendix 2 of this report. The outcome of the consultation is summarised in the report as well. So the consultation was launched on the 16th of July 25 and closed on the 21st of August 25. In total, the consultation received 805 responses, and overall, the majority of respondents, over 80% of the total sample, agreed with the 4 objectives outlined within the strategy, with agreement higher amongst residents than amongst current or former empty property owners. Empty property owners that responded to the consultation generally felt that the approach was too punitive, and what they did with their property was their choice. Conversely, residents of the city expressed a desire to see more punitive action taken around empty properties towards owners who failed to bring their properties back into use. And another key message was the awareness of support amongst empty property owners was low. Whilst officers recognise the feedback from the consultation and have carefully considered this, the recommendation is to adopt the proposed strategy as contained in Appendix 1. There were some conflicting views expressed within the consultation feedback, for example, for the call from local residents for more punitive action, whereas empty property owners were calling for less intervention. On reviewing the proposed strategic approach, officers believe this strikes a reasonable balance between those opposing views in trying to engage and support private residential property owners at the earliest opportunity, whilst outlining the use of formal enforcement powers where they are necessary and proportionate to do so. So the proposed strategy contains 4 key aims, which are to maximise the usable housing stock in the city by supporting owners of empty properties to return them to functional homes, to tackle the problems that empty properties cause residents, particularly focusing upon environmental issues such as pest issues or property disrepair, work in a more joined up way across council directorates who have an interest in addressing the issues, related to empty properties, and to broaden the way that the council works with external partners. The key here is to make bringing back into use empty properties everybody's business. And the fourth aim is to intervene at the earliest opportunity after a property becomes empty, to reduce the number of properties that become long-term empty and the issues associated with this. There is no statutory requirement for the council to have an empty property strategy, but it of course is recognised that that is good practice. Specific actions around how the council seeks to achieve its strategic objectives is outlined within the strategy. The ethos behind the strategy places an emphasis on communication, advice and support, enforcement where appropriate, measuring the impact to help inform our approach and understand the effectiveness of those interventions. And a really key part is partnership working. So the strategy recognises the issues of empty properties touch several services across the council and the wider system, and therefore a partnership approach should be adopted to best deal with the wide-ranging issues empty properties can present. Therefore, the recommendations are that the Cabinet Member for Housing and Tackling Homelessness notes the outcomes and findings from the recent non-statutory consultation, and that the Cabinet Member for Housing and Tackling Homelessness agrees to implement the new strategy contained in Appendix 1 with immediate effect. Thank you.
Thank you. Claire, Residents Consortium colleagues, any comments or questions?
I think there's only one thing that crossed my mind, and that was, excuse me, got a cough. If you have somebody that owns a property that's got no particular, just letting it sit there, not going to rent it out, try and sell it, whatever, what would be the dangling carrot to get them to engage with you and take up maybe any offers of help, etc., to get that property let?
So I think there are, as the strategy outlines, there are a number of reasons why that can occur. And what we see fairly often is that it's because the person doesn't necessarily want that property to sit there empty. They do recognise that there are benefits to them and to the wider community of bringing it back into use. It's often a case of being unclear about what paths or routes they have, what support is available, and really the overwhelm. There's usually some other situation that's preventing that from happening. And what the strategy recognises is that we can put support in place and signpost to those areas of support at the earliest opportunity. The strategy does recognise that any property owner has a right to own their property and to do what they want with it. But in our experience and in reviewing previous cases, that early intervention, that signposting of help and support is likely to make a much more impactful and positive difference in those situations.
That's lovely, thank you. And then maybe long term, would it be that you could maybe free up somebody from the housing register and engage them with that tenant, that landlord, and put them into that property? Would that free up then space on the housing list, maybe?
Yep, so the strategy recognises that there are a number of benefits to this and a number of routes of bringing properties back into use. That is one of the things that has been identified, that there's a possible route there. We've also done things like empty dwelling management orders in the past, and we will continue to use that as one of the tools within the toolkit of bringing properties back into use. And that is an option to be able to place people from the housing register into those properties.
That's great, thank you.
Thanks for that, Mandy. Spencer, did you have any questions or comments at all?
Nothing from me, thank you.
This is going to be nearly as quick as the questions yesterday, I'll tell you. Yes, no, maybe. Young Raj.
No, nothing from me, thank you.
Oh, blimey, it is as quick as yesterday, I'll tell you. Okay, that's lovely. I spent the weekend with the Dickens Fellowship, I have to say. And That just reminded me, because I was as soon as I saw this, I thought of the Jarndyce and Jarndyce case out of Bleak House, which is a good lawyer, young Spencer will know, is one that went on for centuries. And it was over a house, and it went on for centuries, and it never got resolved because nobody intervened to resolve it. And so, Mandy, when you made your points earlier, that's exactly what I thought, which is why I double-checked. Because this strategy is designed to avoid things like that. Because people in our city don't like homes staying empty for years. I know 3 cases in my ward where that's happened. I'm sure Spencer knows it, Raj knows it. My 41 council colleagues all will have something or other around that. And this strategy aims to avoid that. And it is a balance, as people have said. I noted the punitive action that people wanted, which I think was the stocks for the landlords. And it's reflected in some of the discussions that we have on HMOs, frankly. I mean, in case of your previous point, we had a council motion from some of the reform councillors of actually publicising HMOs. HMOs the council owns, which will include publicising the addresses of the refugees you were talking about. Now, we think that's not good. And that's why the council as a whole oppose that policy. But it shows the desire that people have to ensure that homes come back into use. The weird irony is that in this city, the number of empty homes that we're getting is flatlining, as opposed to going up massively as in the rest of the country. But despite that, it's important that we have this strategy and this balanced approach. We have cut the number of weeks council properties avoid in half since my crew resumed control in 2018. We're proud of that because it means people don't stay on the register. And we have to do all we can to make sure that happens. There is one other thing. I know Claire, you talked about empty dwelling management orders and all that sort of stuff. It's absolutely right. There is one other thing we're waiting for government from, which is called compulsory purchase orders. At the moment, if you compulsory purchase a property, the landowner is entitled to include what's called hope value, which is how much the owner hopes it might go for, which essentially is name your price time. And we know that stopped this council from buying various properties across the city, not purely residential. And that means they've just stayed there. And that's mad. My party, the Liberal Democrats, wanted to get rid of the hope value thing. The Labour government is hopefully going to introduce something around fair compensation, whatever that means. We want to see. But at least that's a step in the right direction, and that's encouraging. So I want to see all powers used, and that's why I think this strategy will at least start to work, and Jarndyce will only be a road in Buckland as opposed to a policy in future. So thank you all for your comments. Alison, I think we can agree that you said immediately, Claire, and immediately is 4:33 p.m. on Wednesday afternoon. So thank you very much, Alison. I think we can progress that. Next on the list is this is longer than the question section yesterday at the council meeting, Portsmouth Homes Rent and Service Charge Setting Policy for Housing Revenue Account Owned Social Housing. I understand each of those words, but not necessarily all in that order.
Snappy little title.
Thank you very much indeed. We will discuss this later. So, Mark, I assume that you're the person who's been designated for this in rehearsals. So, feel free to talk about it.
Thank you, Councillor Sanders. I'm here to present the paper and hopefully for you to approve the recommendations for 4 or 3 minor changes to the existing policy, which was set in September 2024. The recommendations are to allow rent flexibility to be applied to general needs accommodation in line with the rent standard, to update the definition of supported accommodation to reflect the definition provided by the government policy statement for the rent standard, and to remove the reference that affordable rents will be limited to local housing allowance rates. And the policy will be implemented for the 26-27 rent setting process. So just by way of background, obviously Portsmouth Homes is the local authority's housing provider for its social stock, and we've got approximately 15,400 general needs properties, which consist of general needs and sheltered accommodation. predominantly in the area or the city of Portsmouth, but also in the neighbouring authorities of Havant, Fareham, Gosport and Winchester. In addition, we own and manage around 2,000 leasehold and shared ownership properties, and the rent and service charge setting policy covers all of that stock. The current rent and service charge setting policy outlines the Council's policy for dealing with rent and service charge setting on all of its stock, including those that are outside the Portsmouth city boundary. The current policy was agreed in September 2024 and is linked in the table of the documents within the document that you've got in front of you. The government recently announced that the rent standard will be extended for 10 years, meaning that annual increases will be based on CPI plus 1% and will continue until at least 2036. And in addition to this, the government have also recently consulted on the rent convergence, which is a mechanism to bring all social rents back to expected formula rent levels. Although we were expecting a decision on rent convergence in the autumn budget statement on the 26th of November, that was delayed until early next year, but we are expecting that the announcement on rent convergence will be based on the rent standard and therefore will be covered by this policy. In terms of the two rent levels that we've got social rents. So the rents that we charge to the majority of our general needs tenants are based on the government's formula rent regime to calculate the rent, and when the property becomes void, we apply that formula to create a social rent. And the affordable rents are set by an independent valuation. Again, when the property comes empty, we get the property revalued and then set the rent at 80% of the current market rent, which is an inclusive rent of service charge. In terms of the review of the policy, we've consulted with the resident consortium, and also the policy's been on the consultation page for all residents to provide feedback for. And the feedback has implemented some changes within the policy as part of that review process. The revised policy with agreed amendments, if approved, will be implemented for the rent uprating process for 26-27 and thereafter. And just some reasons for the recommendations. For general needs tenancies, once the social rents have been calculated, the rent standard allows the flexibility to set rents up to plus 5% above the formula rent for new tenancies. By adding this flexibility to the policy for all general needs tenancies created, the change will provide an opportunity to increase the income into the HRA where there is justification due to factors that could include things like improvements to the building necessary to meet the building safety and fire safety, site-specific improvements such as additional security measures, new build developments or regeneration schemes. In terms of the definition for supported housing accommodation, we just need some clarity so that it's clear that it does encompass sheltered, supported and extra care accommodation. And the removal of the local housing allowance limit on rents charged will provide consistency to the process of rent uprating and provide clarity and transparency. Also, that the local housing allowance is not relevant for social housing tenants, and therefore for those tenants that are in receipt of housing related benefits, so long as their personal circumstances have not changed, any increases in rent will be covered by their housing related benefit. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mark. Residents Consortium colleagues, any questions or any comments?
Yeah, I actually spent a lot of time reading this one because I think it's absolutely marvellous that this can go forward. It's reassuring, I think, for everybody, and it's nice to see it happening. So, thank you.
Okay, thank you for that, Greg. Raj, any questions or comments?
No comments, no. Thank you.
Okay. Spencer, any questions or comments?
Not for me.
I think you just shake your head in future. Feel free to ask anything at any time. I do have some questions and comments, and I'm going to disagree with the Residents Consortium, frankly. But this should be quite interesting. It makes me sound more paternalistic than I am. Broadly, this is fine, I have to say. We have to reflect the set of circumstances that we've got. I recommend paragraph 3.7 to you of the report, which talks about the idiotic approach of cutting rents for people living in council houses, but not people who rent privately. which frankly was just designed to hamper the cost of living between 2016 and 2021. And that's also removed several £1 million from this account, which is less money to spend on making homes safe, less money to spend on doing kitchens up. So that has led us to the situation we have now. I'm pleased with the certainty that the Labour government has provided for the next 10 years, even if it's the same rent cap as the Tories put in, but this is life. The one bit where I disagree, I have to say, is that I really don't like breaking promises, I have to say. And I've regularly said at every rent session that rents should be set at the local housing allowance level. And that is purely for the cost of living. It's as simple as that. We need to make sure that we don't bust anything. Now, I know that no one will be offered a place they can't afford. But this is an important signal for us in terms of the cost of living. So, however, I am prepared to take the policy to remove that cap if it will deliver council homes. Really important. If it means we can't build council homes or have new council homes in the city, if this is stopping that, that is one thing I will not put up with, because we need more homes people can afford. But if I get a proposal next year, it will be next year, to put up conventional rents as opposed to rents for new housing developments, I'll say no. Simple as that. I know how much it will generate, and I believe that that is not something we can take except for generating new council homes. If it stops generating new council homes, that is silly, because people deserve to live in homes that are suitable. The other aspect is paragraph 3.9, which is rent convergence. You'll be interested, now note that paragraph. If that had been announced in the budget, then that will form part of the rent package. It is the right thing to do, and frankly, it will significantly improve the budget position of the housing revenue account. Significantly. I want to see what it looks like. I'd have loved for the team to put it forwards, because I know it'll generate more money than lifting the LHA cap will ever do, and I think that's an incredibly good thing going forwards, and I look forward to being able to do that. So I will take forward the document as it stands, but with the belief that it generates new housing, new social housing development, because I don't want my political preferences designed to make sure that people can cope with the cost of living to get in the way of building new homes people can afford. So therefore, I'll take the policy forward as it stands, but there is a health warning, just in case. I look forward to being able to deal with rent convergence as we go along. So, on that basis, I accept the document as it stands, and I accept the recommendations as they stand. But thank you very much, colleagues, for a balanced approach to what is a situation that is suboptimal, courtesy of government policies of the past. Right, on to happier things. The temporary accommodation placement policy. Which lucky person has got that?
That will be me, Councillor Sanders. The purpose of this report is to propose a new temporary accommodation placements policy. It's recommended that the policy be approved, effective tomorrow, and published on the council website thereafter. Just by way of background, it'll be a surprise to nobody in this room to hear me say that homelessness has increased in recent years nationally and locally, and that this has therefore resulted in a significant increase in demand for temporary accommodation from homeless households, specifically households owed duties under that legislation. We saw an increase from April 2020, 180 households accommodated in temporary accommodation under homeless legislation, rising to 579 households 5 years later in April 2025, so a more than trebling of that number. Most commonly, those households are accommodated under the interim Section 188 duty under the Housing Act 96, and the so-called main duty, Section 193 of the same Act. Section 206 of that Act provides that any accommodation provided under those duties must be suitable, which does have a legal meaning. This policy cannot and is not intended to address homelessness more generally. That's the job of the homelessness strategy and the associated action plan. But what this policy aims to do is lay out the various considerations the council must have in determining whether or not an offer of temporary accommodation is suitable. Though there's no statutory requirement for this policy, it does provide clarity to homeless applicants as who need temporary accommodation, and follows the guidance set out in the Supreme Court judgment of Nzola Meso and Westminster, where the lead judgment was given by Lady Hale. So the policy presented is a refresh of the existing 2020 policy. Much of the substantive content is very similar, not least because many of the considerations are legally mandated. They were then and they are now. For example, the requirement to accommodate children, households containing children or pregnant women for no more than a maximum of 6 weeks in bed and breakfast accommodation. The requirement to have consideration as to the suitability of the location of temporary accommodation and how that might impact on a household's ability to work, access education, or their caring responsibilities. And the size and physical suitability of accommodation is also a consideration to be had, along with whether the accommodation is affordable and whether the accommodation would have any impact on the household's health or disabilities or any other relevant protected characteristics under the Equality Act 2010. What has changed since 2020, though, is the context we find ourselves in. So we have the homelessness strategy published in 24 with a key strategic aim to provide the right accommodation, including temporary accommodation, and there are specific actions in that homelessness strategy aimed at increasing the supply of suitable accommodation. So this refreshed policy does bring some elements up to date from that original policy. It recognises those situations where the council may determine a property to be at once unreasonable to occupy in the long term, but suitable as temporary accommodation in the short term. For example, where there's an understanding the landlord intends to recover possession of the property in the future. It brings up to date the types of temporary accommodation available to the council in 2025, including the commission-supported temporary accommodation, which is a cost-effective way of meeting the needs of people who are homeless and with additional support needs. And the policy acknowledges that accommodation that's owned by PCC and or managed by PCC is very usually going to be the preferred option in most cases. It consistently meets the needs of residents in the most cost-effective way possible. And crucially, the policy recognises the increased volume and variety of that type of temporary accommodation we now have in 2025. So whereas just a couple of years ago there were 86 units of accommodation owned or managed by PCC, fast forward to October 2025, and that's increased to 244 units, so a significant increase. That's a number that's expected to grow, largely thanks to the Homes for TA project approved earlier this year, which sets out the council's aim to purchase 200 properties for this purpose over a 2-year period. So the recommendation is therefore made because the existing policy is due to expire this year, but also to bring up to date the content of the policy with that additional context, to provide additional clarity for residents and to ensure we are compliant with the recommendations of the Supreme Court.
Shane, thank you very much indeed. Residents Consortium colleagues, any questions or comments?
Right. I've got a background of working with homeless guys and girls. I've actually been very poignant in helping some of them to get into properties. I know quite a lot of your hostels, your properties in North End, the shared houses, etc. So I just really wanted to give you a pat on the back because I think you've done really well. And the 2 guys that I personally helped, it would have been very dangerous for them to be on the streets. And they are now thriving and doing really well. So yeah, just a bit of a pat on the back really. I think you've done well. Okay.
Mandy, thank you very much indeed. Alison, could that be noted in our minutes, please? Thank you. Oh, what, Joe, you're not going to say Mandy's wrong, are you? I thought not.
I was just going to take the opportunity to say how grateful we are for the help that people like Mandy give to people in temporary accommodation. Mandy ensures people have got cots and furniture and all of the things that they need, as do other organisations and other volunteers. And it's incredibly important for people in temporary accommodation who come to us with very little. So just a shout out really to Mandy and others who do offer that help.
Thank you for that, Joe. I'm not sure that goes in the minutes, but anyway, we'll have a think about that. Greg.
Yeah, as someone who actually was in temporary accommodation when I first arrived in Portsmouth with 3 young sons, I have to echo what Mandy has said. We were looked after very well, and it wasn't a dreadful experience, and we've survived on 2 occasions. So my thanks go out to you, and you're doing a wonderful job.
I think we might have to expand that little section a bit, actually. Thank you very much indeed for that, Greg. That's very kind of you. Thank you. Raj, any questions or comments?
Yes, thank you. Yeah, as Greg said, actually, I know someone personally who currently is in temporary accommodation, and actually, as Greg said, is actually very comfortable in that temporary accommodation. It's just not quite enough bedrooms for the amount of children there. Is there an actual time limit, or even a ballpark sort of, time limit on these things? And also, completely separate, just out of interest, I could be missing this. Is there a budget or an estimate or restrictions on the purchase of those 200 properties coming through? Sorry, thank you.
No worries. You have to tell me if I miss any parts of your question.
Yeah, so it really was 2. Sorry, yeah. So yeah.
So in terms of the Homes for TA, I'll start with that. So Homes for TA is within the capital programme, and it's a sum that we were given. In terms of the amounts, it's more that within the envelope of the funding we need to achieve the 200 homes. So we're able to look at the individual market value for each property, and we're focusing on 1 and 2 bedrooms. And the point that you made in the first part of the question about someone not having quite enough bedrooms in their temporary accommodation is linked to the housing supply issue that we're having with larger family accommodation. So as well as Homes for TA, we're also purchasing additional larger family accommodation. That's a separate pot of money. And what we're doing there is we're trying to ensure that our temporary accommodation units, which are predominantly needed in 1 and 2 beds, we're putting there, and then the larger family homes we're giving people as their permanent home. So we're doing both. There isn't really an amount per property. It's all based on the individual market value and then negotiated value with the particular owner, as well as the fact that we'll need to consider things like the amount of void work that a property might need to bring it up to standard, or any alterations that have been made that we might need to put back. So those kind of considerations happen. There's an individual survey of each property to make sure that within the envelope of value we're able to do all of those things.
Great, thank you very much. I'm obviously, I think the need is obviously for those bigger properties, isn't it? It's for the 3-bedroom plus properties, but there's still very much an emphasis on the majority of the properties that we would look in buy would be 1 or 2 bedrooms.
So I think it's probably fair to say that we need everything. Yeah. So across the housing register, we need everything, with particular focus on our temporary accommodation, and because we're talking about temporary accommodation, within our temporary accommodation, what we're seeing is that we're more able to meet the needs of smaller households by returning them to the private rented sector, where the LHA rate is more appropriate to market value. As families get bigger, the affordability of larger family property diverts more from the LHA rate, and so it makes those circumstances more likely to only be met by social housing. And so what we're seeing is that we have got a kind of crisis in that larger family accommodation. We also know, I know this is kind of obvious, but I'll just say it out loud. If you move someone into a 3-bedroom property that's already in a 2-bedroom property, they release that 2-bedroom property. Then if you move someone from a 1-bedroom into that 2-bedroom, you effectively create a chain of moves. And so the reason that we're focusing our general needs acquisitions on that larger property is because it creates more movement. So we're able, with one acquisition, to move 3 or 4 people into the right size home by the fact that each one that moves on releases something else. And the more of our existing tenants from across the city that we move into the right home, the more moves are made available for everybody. So I'm very happy to talk you through it in more detail because I could talk about it forever, but I promise I won't.
That's great. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thanks for that, Raj. Spencer, do you have any questions or comments at all?
No, that's very comprehensive. Nothing from me. Thank you.
That's all right. Thank you very much indeed. Raj will give you lectures and homilies and sessions on spreadsheets around buying back council properties, but it's also around trying to make sure the council makes money on the borrowing, which is very important and assists with the budgetary resilience of everything. Yeah, this is absolutely fine. It's really interesting because councils across the country are going bust because of temporary accommodation. Really simple. Several councils in London, was it 20% of some of our Labour colleagues in councils in London is spent on temporary accommodation, and they are going bust because of this. We have not gone bust in this city. We've come close. We've not gone bust in this city because of it, because of the proactive work that we've done. Buying back the properties for temporary accommodation is based on the model that we've used to buy back 600, 700, 1,500 if you include the carrying homes, properties over the past few years. Because we know people want a safe home. They want a secure home. And that's why we're doing this. And it's a quick way of doing this to make sure people don't spend time on too much time on the waiting list, and spending one day on the waiting list is one day too long. I have one question, colleagues. The budget had the money for temporary accommodation going into the council's base budget. Have we had any further clarification as to what on earth that's going to mean? Because I haven't.
I think you mean the homeless prevention grant, do you? And the element of it
I believe that's the case,
okay.
yes.
No further clarity.
Excellent. Well, next week's funding settlement is going to be hilarious then. We will be keeping an eye on that, because what we don't want to have is a cut as a result of that, and us and frankly those councils who are in real dire straits because of this to suffer. But I'm delighted with the stuff that we've done with temporary accommodation, and our ambitious and proactive approach, I think, has stopped us keeling over in the way that many other councils are keeling over as a result of this. And crucially, we're providing a safe and secure home for people. Too many people do spend too long in temporary accommodation, we know that. One day is too long. We have, as far as I know, still no families in bed and breakfast for more than 6 weeks, which is, again, unlike many other councils in the country, even though everyone knows that breaks the law. And I did a session at my party's conference in September, and the number of councils who just came up to me and said, "How the hell did you do that?" was quite impressive. So I'm delighted to approve this policy. We need to make sure that we look after the least of these brothers and sisters of ours. It's incredibly important. And we have to make sure the accommodation is good, and that when they move in, it's good, and that they have as pleasant a time as they can, and ideally make sure that the accommodation they move into permanently is even better. So I'm happy to accept this placement policy. We'll always keep it under review, but I look forward to next week's budget, local council finance settlement with some trepidation. So Alison, we're happy to put forward the recommendations. Thank you very much indeed. I believe they start tomorrow, so they'll start at midnight, as opposed to 1 minute to 5. So luckily, we have one more item to go. Don't get too excited. It's the water hygiene. Now, which lucky Amy was the one who drew the long straw in rehearsals, right? Lovely. You do rehearsals, I don't. So Amy, fire away, please.
Thank you. So I'm presenting the decision meeting report for the updated water hygiene policy. The purpose is to update members on the review of the existing water hygiene policy and seek approval to implement the proposed changes to the policy from the 15th of December 2025. The water policy applies to Portsmouth Homes dwellings, and the water hygiene policy was previously approved on the 1st of October 2024. The updates include changing layout with Portsmouth Homes policies, changing wording from Portsmouth City Council Local Authority Housing to Portsmouth Homes, and changing wording to provide clarity on clarification on a variety of elements, including who the responsible person is under the policy, on the items that a specialist will be undertaken in relation to water hygiene, that weekly flushing will be carried out and recorded by Portsmouth Homes or site staff in communal areas, where a Legionella risk assessment will and won't be carried out, and this is in line with relevant legislation, that inspection and monitoring activities will be undertaken in line with the risk assessment that is produced, what is expected when a property becomes void, and recommendation added to the Your Responsibility section regarding residents flushing any infrequently used outlets in their home if not used over a period of 7 days. We undertook consultation with residents through the policy focus group and through the consultation webpage, and following that, changes were made to the policy, which included wording change from timely manner to carried out in line with the Legionella risk assessment timeframes, and if that wasn't achievable, additional mitigation will be introduced. So generally that is the main updates on the policy. So the recommendation would be to implement the policy from the 15th of December 2025.
Okay, thank you for that, Amy. Residents Consortium colleagues, any questions or comments on this?
No, thank you.
You're just looking like University Challenge over there because you're all conferring. I thought that was absolutely lovely. I thought it was excellent. This is good. I'm so glad now you, like me, you don't do rehearsals. It's excellent. It really is. Spencer, any questions or comments at all?
Thank you, Councillor Sanders. To what I appreciate, so that the policy is about avoiding incidents before they occur. But is there anything we can point to show that the policy has been working in terms of near misses or high risk recordings, or just not possible to say because it's about avoidance as much as anything else?
So as part of the Legionella risk assessment, it identifies what sampling and monitoring we have to do. So we follow that risk assessment for each individual property, and each individual property have set, depending on what the requirements are, will all be recorded. So we can monitor whether there are any high risk or higher levels than expected, which would be investigated as required. We haven't had any high levels.
Anything else, Spencer? Nope, thank you very much indeed. Raj?
Yeah, thank you. I didn't think I was going to say anything on this just because it's so beyond my level of knowledge. But it's because it is so beyond my level of knowledge. I do have a question, actually. In regards to the Your Responsibility part, one, how is that actually being pushed out? Is that leaflets going out and everything? And what is the advice being given? Because I would have no idea how long I'd have to leave a tap running or whatever in order to flush that out.
So generally, when a property is being used as a normal residence, you wouldn't need to flush anything. So it's only for prolonged lengths of time. So if someone's away on holiday, for example, and what would need to happen is just opening of taps to run the system through for a couple of minutes. Some of the recommendations are 5 minutes, and then we push it through house talk mainly, generally in the summer, because obviously that relates to when the summer holiday time frame.
Sorry, House Talk, did you say that's a programme where you
it's the magazine for Portsmouth Homes.
I do apologise, yeah, fantastic. So that would be the only way we're really pushing that out and giving that advice?
We'd look at other on the website is also, and if there was needed to, on social media.
That's great, thank you.
Raj, thank you very much. I have a question which actually follows on from Raj was saying. We say, we ensure that all outlets within the property, well, when they're void, we ensure that all outlets within the property are flushed for at least 2 minutes per outlet every 7 days. Do we go around with a stopwatch?
I don't know if they go around with a stopwatch, but the contractors look after the voids are the ones that manage the flushing protocol in those properties.
And then the next point is related and slightly less facetious, which is that for tenants, it is around, as you've just said, making sure things are flushed for at least 2 minutes and after long periods of absences for at least 5 minutes. How's that enforced?
So it'd be it's a recommendation, so it's entirely up to the individual residents whether they follow through with that. So we don't enforce it.
Okay. Okay. I mean, it's in here, and we're asking people to do it, and there's a perfectly logical reason to do it, and it is a very good thing. So I might... Are you okay? Sorry to sound paternalistic. I apologise, Amy. I think it might be useful as part of our tenancy update visits to just check and see that that happens. Because I'm sure Spencer and Raj will talk for England on the times whereby people have come to all of us and said, you do this 20-mile-an-hour zone and nobody enforces it, and all that stuff. And we can't have that in people's homes. The 20-mile-an-hour zone is a very sensible policy, as is this. But enforcement is the key. So I'm suggesting that we enforce that through tenancy update visits. Oh, Greg, hello. The conferring worked. Right, lovely.
Is there any special advice put in place for those who are immunosuppressed? Because I'm immunosuppressed, so I have to be super diligent because I'm an open book for any diseases or anything that's going around. So is there any special advice? Is there any note taken of if there are buildings which are more a problem than others?
So obviously when we do a Legionella risk assessment, that will identify any risks and then we'll put procedural mitigation in place. In terms of your individual properties where you're living, Legionella by itself is not a particular issue. When you're living in the property normally, there will not be an issue because you're constantly flushing toilets, using the taps, etc. So it's not something that you particularly need to worry about day to day. It's more that if it's a prolonged period of not using something, so for example, you could have a resident where maybe they don't go upstairs very often and the bathroom's up there. And again, through the UV visits, we could pick that up and work with them about how, one is at the right property, but also how can we mitigate that risk. If you're, 99% of residents living in their properties, this isn't an issue for, because just living normally will cover it.
So I'm safe. Thank you.
Thanks for that, Greg. One of the interesting things that's occurred since the last meeting, whereby we approved, I think, a very sensible policy around tenant access, is I'm told there's been a court case whereby the judge has said that actually if a social housing landlord wants to actually access a property in order to do safety assessments and things like that, then actually that's a breach of tenancy, which I think that colleagues correct me if I'm wrong on that one. But I mean, that's which is price stupidity as far as I'm concerned. But I think you've just highlighted one of the reasons why it's absolutely important that we have people to come into people's homes and actually make sure that we're able to do this properly and make sure things like this are important. I'll be an equal opportunities praiser of my political opponents, and I praised Councillor Shah from the Labour Party earlier on, and I will now praise Councillor Bosher from the Conservative Party yesterday, who rightly outlined some of the madness that we have to put up with Southern Water, and clearly we don't want a rerun of that nonsense in our homes. And that's why I think this policy is eminently sensible, why I'm more than happy to approve it. Alison. Okay, so on that basis, that concludes the fun and frolics for the day. And therefore, I therefore close this meeting at 5:08. Thank you very much, and as this is my last meeting before what we now euphemistically call the holidays, happy Christmas. Thank you.